Hello, everybody. We are starting with our next session on this class on IT strategy. And we talked about IT strategy and importance of information. And then the second module, we discussed the importance of architecture and the actual architecture that we use in technology. And now we're going to look at the financial aspects of IT investments. So as you see, we have looked at strategy, architecture, and we are going to focus on really the payoffs here. And this becomes a very important part of IT strategy because when we have such huge spending, we really need to make sure that the spending is worth the money which is put in. What you need to walk away is essentially you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So you need a measurement for it. So let's start off again with the jargon decoder. The IT payoff clock, which is a word we'll use, is the sequential steps for information technology to deliver financial benefits. Operational metrics are the short-term metrics that judge IT impact. Financial metrics are the long-term metrics that judge IT's bottom line impact. IT funding dilemma is whether to focus on simple, accurate, or fair. And this is important because you can really pick two out of the three. You can have simple and accurate, or simple and fair, or you can have accurate and fair. But you are going to lose on one of these three different criteria or priorities. The 80-20 rule is that 20% of metrics provide 80% of the insight into IT's business value. So it's important that we focus on the right metrics. We will be using the word capital versus operating costs. Capital costs are upfront versus the larger ongoing cost of keeping IT assets running. A lot of times people make, just like we talked about in the architecture chapter, people make a lot of decisions based on upfront costs. And they forget that the running costs might end up, because it's further down the road, that it might end up being more expensive when you choose a cheaper option upfront. We're going to talk about options, the flexibility without the obligation to do something in a project, and we'll talk about that. So IT annual spending is now going over $4 trillion, and firms are questioning whether they are getting their money's worth from their single biggest capital expense. 8 out of the 10 firms struggle to estimate the benefits of their IT investments. So the questions are basic. Are we getting our money's worth? How much does it cost? Who foots the bill? Are we investing in the right places? And how do we tread when payoff is potentially huge, but we're not sure whether we're going to get the payoff? Very often, we are told that IT, information technology, is difficult to quantify. And it's true, but that's not an excuse not to attempt doing it. So we essentially would like, and this is a constant theme in this class, about non-IT managers coming in to contribute, and this time we need them to contribute to the fiscal part of information technology investments, and thereby connecting IT strategy to managerial accounting and corporate finance. And the real goal is to get a healthy return on IT investments. So Any IT project's financial benefits emerge through a sequence of intervening steps, each of which must go right. And the IT payoff clock, which we'll talk about, summarizes that. And essentially figuring this out will help you pick the appropriate metrics for measuring IT investments. The payoff fails to materialize if even one step goes off, and we must initiate the clock by investing in new IT projects. So the first part is the implementation phase, where we look at IT investment and the rollout. This phase can be short if you purchase the system and integrate it into your IT portfolio, or it can take several years if you're going to custom build it. And project management, which we'll discuss later, is all about getting this part right, irrespective of whether you do it in-house or outsource it. The second phase is adoption. Once we flip the switch after rolling out a completed system, your employees must use it to generate value. A widespread problem in corporate IT units is that the focus is on delivering the software rather than business value. So measurement stops at this point. The third aspect is actually the value creation or business value creation. And an IT system in full-fledged use can begin to generate value by impacting, after a delay, there is a lag, the functional areas that it targets. The short-term operational metrics, which we're going to talk about, measure this operational impact, and they must relate directly to just the activity that a project targets. The time lag after which it is appropriate to attempt to measure is crucial. Measuring too early and you incorrectly conclude that this project is a dud. Now, a lot of firms, most firms, don't get this far. Instead, they focus on IT performance metrics. Operational metrics for corporate IT must judge desired business outcomes and not technical achievements. If left to their own devices, IT units tend to do what they are experts in, which is technical performance metrics, which is not correlated with business benefits. So technical metrics might be for their own consumption, like system uptime, transaction processing speed, user satisfaction, scores, timeliness of projects, help desk response times. And these should be of little interest to non-IT managers because they do not measure business impact. And finally, we look at the impact on the bottom line. Operational improvements, better, faster, or cheaper in a project's targeted area, must eventually improve revenue or reduce costs, and therefore the firm's bottom line gets impacted. The long-term metrics, which we're going to discuss, which involves a second delay, also requires non-IT managers' impact. So as you can see here, this payoff clock, a lot of the work is to be done by non-IT managers. And a lot of times companies stop here and then just use the technical metrics to judge whether an IT investment is good, and that's really not what is needed to be done. They need to actually go through the full cycle, and it takes time and effort. And that's the final goal. So there are 4 challenges to IT investments, to measure IT investments, and it's different from the normal capital investments such as buildings and factories. First, the many of its benefits are intangible. Increased customer satisfaction, faster decision making, brand awareness, improved collaboration, and their intangibility can never be an excuse for poor fiscal discipline, because intangible benefits are benefits only if they eventually show up in the bottom line in its measurable future prospects. There are lags in the impact. The observable impact of IT investments is rarely immediate. It can take time for applications to be absorbed into the firm's operations. The IT infrastructure can have a long payback period involving complementary IT investments that leverage it. The time frame for IT investments must explicitly recognize such lags at each major investment. There are attribution challenges. This is essentially, it's difficult to attribute improvements in an organization outcome because of IT investments. If your sales increase next year, you would be hard pressed to be certain that it is caused by a website overhaul and not because the economy improved or a rival dropped the ball. The longer the lag, the more difficult it is to actually attribute improvement to your IT investments. The length of time appropriate for both of them must come entirely from non-IT managers. Judgments of IT must therefore track year-on-year changes in key business metrics and benchmark them against your arch rivals whenever possible. Are they getting worse or not? Finally, we're looking at complementarities. IT investments often have complementary. One IT investment can be worth more in conjunction with another. Examples: Starbucks smartphone ordering system was more valuable when Starbucks also invested in in-store cash registers that could process orders received from it. This required IT metrics to track the impact of firm's portfolio of IT assets rather than individual projects. So you can see that this is not an easy task. So IT metrics must account for all four of these issues. So let's look at some properties for appropriate metrics. So you know that measurement drives behavior, and you must be careful about your choice of IT metrics because you encourage what they measure. Firms often use too many metrics, and which drowns people in huge amounts of data. The simpler is better. A thoughtful few is better than having too many. So let's look at an IT investment attribute, intangibility of benefits. How these IT metrics must translate the intangible benefits into measurable business consequences. Let's look at the issue of lagged impact. So we need to figure out an appropriate time span to track this. The attribution challenge. We need to track changes in metrics and benchmark it against the rivals. And then we have low payoff without complementary investments, and therefore we must monitor the information technology portfolio's impact on business and not just individual IT products. IT metrics are appropriate if they push information technology to solve the right problems that move your firm towards its strategic aspirations. So I would suggest that we follow the Pareto optimal rule or the 80-20 rule for selecting metrics. Strive to find 20% of the metrics that provide 80% of the insight into the business value of information technology. Use 3 criteria to select just a few IT metrics. 1, cost effectiveness. 2, competitive thoughtfulness. And 3, objectivity. So let's talk a little bit about cost effectiveness. And you can see that it is important when you look at the financial benefits of technology, and part of it is the business value, that measurement cost should not be very huge. The larger measurement cost is, it eats up a lot of the financial benefits and reduces the business value. So if it's going to take a lot to measure something, it should not be more than the business value of IT. The other two which we talked about, so that kind of takes account, it's essentially the cost effectiveness of IT. We talked about competitive insightfulness. To be strategically relevant, an IT metric must be business centric, not IT centric. It should help you gauge how your IT assets are moving your firm towards its strategic aspirations, squeezing costs if you're a cost leader, increasing customer willingness to pay if you aspire differentiation. It should help you benchmark against your arch rivals the business value that your firm is getting from IT. And finally, I talked about it being objective, spanning the short and long term. The excuse that IT benefits are intangible lacks credibility because IT costs real money. If IT metrics are subjective, IT proponents and opponents can construct their own narrative untroubled by facts. Having verifiable, agreed upon IT success metrics dodges a guessing game that no one can win. Such metrics must be objectively quantifiable. Subjective IT satisfaction ratings is not a substitute for objective metrics. They also provide a reliable way to compare IT investments across from year to year.